this separation in this structured conflict is going to fail. It's going to fail. In their last desperate moments, they use extreme force. In other words, law becomes the force of law. No longer the rule of law or rule of justice or natural law. It's been mutated into a force of law. Don't ask, don't tell. Whatever you want to call it, people who dissent.
It's the process is called consensus. In other words, if you sit there and keep your mouth shut when they say, well, we're going to have to inspect your backyard gardens, then you become part of the consensus, don't you?
It's even worse. Now, remember in World War II, they had victory gardens, and you were patriotic, and people put in victory gardens.
That's
My
right.
suggestion to
They also let me also mention there that they also put out a film called Hemp for Victory and asked the American farmers to start growing hemp again to help the war effort.
Well, it's interesting to note that the Constitution of the United States was
Written on hemp.
paper, this hemp.
Our flag was made out of hemp. The sails that we crossed the ocean and became the #1 power on Earth was done with hemp as sails and rope.
Always the problem is that in comes the ICO level corporations and the hemp industry, especially the recreational aspect of smoking dope and all things. They've already left the patents and copyrights on the containers, and the very people that have poo-pooed the hippie smoking hemp and all that, they're already into franchising themselves with the United States government, franchising them with labels, patents, trademarks, and so forth. So this is what's going on.
Our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, warned us if we ever allow a private bank to issue our money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land that we conquered.
The problem underlying, overarching all of this, obviously, is the British monetary system and its handling of the Fed. The Fed is a corporation. The Fed is not of us. It's on us. The doctrines, all of the doctrines at the global level, the reforms and so forth, do not abrogate the floating currency exchange rate. This is a principal weapon used against all peoples, and it ends up in a debt servitude situation. Posterity. Selling and buying currency to every Christian that's knowledgeable is not proper, because you are not to treat money as a product.
Now,
what has happened in this respect is that the United States government, the local county governments such as Lane County, Oregon, its council, its regional council governments, treat the quality of life as an article of commerce. They sell it as a product, and they acknowledge and admit to this and publicize that their product, their government product, which the government is a corporation with private partner corporations, so-called private, are selling this to the highest payer through taxation, subsidies, and so forth.
in other words, they made our grandfathers and great uncles into criminals with prohibition. The Brofmans and the Kennedys got rich. The Al Capones and the Meyer Lanskys got rich off of charging more for bootleg alcohol. They made our grandfather. They ran their tractors and their cars and their Model A's and Model T's off of alcohol. But suddenly they were bootleggers and moonshiners.
One of the principal aims of the prohibition was to stop that, to stop farmers from producing alternative fuels, and the reason was the ICO level, the corporate conglomerates wanted to monopolize the control over fuel. To this day, that has gone on. About 60% of the cost of fuel per gallon that's sold in America goes to derivative speculation.
and not one American, including me, really, knows what these derivatives are all about. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's
Derivatives are fictitious, meaning that you have people. There's an old rock song that says it's very well, money for nothing and chicks for free. Now, what happened was the derivative system is where these handlers, these financial handlers, come together and they derive a derivative speculation system. They literally have nothing to invest. They have nothing real. So they put themselves in a position of surrogate power and authority, and obviously influence the government, corporate agents to be their benefactors, their partners, and they end up making money out of nothing. They're not bringing anything real to the community.
They're true parasites.
They are macro parasites. The banking system is collapsing at an extensive rate, and basically the mainstream media's job is to mitigate or dumb down the public as it goes, so that basically, it's almost humorous, but it's like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. And the people that are expatriating themselves, the predatory people that are running into their conclaves in other lands, my advice to the decent people of America, all of them, is once these people expatriate and they run to their little conclave or wherever they're going to stay, prohibit them from coming back. That'll solve a lot of problems as we go through this incredible episode in America.
Now, I got outraged at what happened at Waco. To me, that was a psychological operation against the American people. See what happens if you resist by force of arms? See, they made us go in there and kill those 17 little children. We were just trying to save them from a child molester, But we had
the reason they approach providing a remedy through the introspect audit system to all peoples and communities, it's based on education. It's an alternative to a very last order of resistance. Now, the right of resistance is the last defense of liberty against tyranny. People when the Senate no longer listens to people, the people are absolved from civil disobedience. In other words, as they demonize the protesters and the objectors, and especially now in the forums, people who block the consensus are demonized, and under the omnibus Public Lands Management Act that was put together by Wyden and DeFazio, who appear to be Democrats, it basically codified the people who get to sit at the round table of decision makers. Now, I've characterized it as the tilted round table of sinking fools. And they ask why, and I say, well, you press in your consensus process that everybody should be on the same page. The problem is this: you're reading the wrong book. In leadership things that we're doing out here and working in leadership programs, we teach people that the book has many chapters, and within the chapters there are pages, but none of the pages in one chapter belong in another chapter. The consensus system is certainly cult-like, and the Delphi techniques, when you look through the demonstration case files and you find cult and occult in the introspect page on the internet, you'll see how and who and what and when and why people are chosen to belong to cults. Why do they belong to cults? Obviously, anyone who is separate from the consensus is demonized, such in the Waco situation. Now, that drama and that intrigue is not over, nor is Oklahoma, nor is 911, because as the information finally leaks out, there's enough people in America to break the veil of conspiracy. The conspiracy is that Waco people were a cult. The conspiracy is that somebody used a box cutter and came from another nation and took down the Twin Towers while the highly sophisticated NORAD system stood down. The conspiracy is that why don't they tell who was not in the buildings, who wasn't in the buildings in those Twin Towers on 9/11?
No Jews, and they're certainly not Larry Silverstein. There were, what, 10,000 Jews that worked in the World Trade Center, and not one of them showed up for work that day?
There was people suspicious in their own right, and they heard the rumors, but there's too many things that are not coincidental. The overall is this: we do not have to lose trust in our American political system, because that's what they want you to. The collaborators want the U.S. broken into regions, and those are already planned to become part of the UN parliamentary system.
That's right. That's a ninth plank again with corporate farms is regional planning.
Absolutely, and this is everywhere in the stakeholder councils. Now, bear in mind this: very important for people to jump outside of the box if they're going to survive. The UN is a ICO, International Corporate Organization. It is a religious corporation by virtue of its Temple of Understanding, which was put together through the Luciferian Trust and Society. Now, by the time you get through that and you break that veil, you'll see that the final order is that there will be the UN dissolving differences among religions on earth. This is evident in its declaration on the rights of indigenous people. Article 11.2 specifies spiritual property. What is spiritual property? Now, the people deemed experts on indigenous affairs are Bar Association lawyers who are accredited, authenticated, and certified through an alien system. In other words, the indigenous people do not have colleges set up under the British accredited registry. The UN people that are deemed experts under the UN Forum on Indigenous People's Rights, the permanent forum, they declare who gets to even speak and be authenticated as someone competent to speak on indigenous affairs. The problem with that declaration is it was put together under the collaborative process of consensus, and in actuality, in the final end, 3 people wrote the Declaration on Indigenous People's Rights. And in 4 years of interviews, I never found a Native American Indian person in any place that I traveled that knew what the Declaration was, where it came from, or anything else. So in a reciprocal offensive, the Declaration by indigenous people, meaning all of us, came together, and that was thanks to Art George, who has volunteered his efforts, is not part of any association or organization that would create a subservient obedience on his part. He did it out of his indigenous prayers and so forth. In the sense that people are going to have to take back liberty from the lawyers, meaning the judges, the doctors of jurisprudence. When these people make unjust, unfair, and insane decisions and incarcerate people based on their status and potentiality, my recommendation is to come in, look at the situation carefully, and transmit to these people that declaration of vindication. When they receive it, they are, as surrogate powers, they are afraid of it. They have no way around it.
I believe that it was not just my expose and my statement that 9/11, that no Arabs in the cave in Afghanistan made the U.S. Air Force stand down. But I think my plan for Liberty Villages was contributed to that attack on me. Because if you're growing your own food and you're living in your own tribe, and I based the whole thing around the look of an Indian village, I think they're scared to death of that. If we grow our own food and produce our own fuel, whether it's in hemp or corn, and you're running it through a still, or whether you're running algae around a tube around your property, algae grows fast in water, you can make biodiesel out of it. They're scared to death of that. That gives the individuals, in small groups, tribes with headmen, and you can be anything you want. If you want to go to an authentic Indian village, here it is. If you want to go to a Chinese village, eat Chinese food, well, that's wonderful. There's one over there, and I recommend a barbecue at that black village there.
This is very important to understand. First of all, having a sovereign distinction, an attribute in a community, sovereignty is demonized by the surrogate powers.
They just did that. I got ADL did a whole thing trying to point to a father and a son that were killed in Arkansas, shot in Arkansas, and accused of killing a police officer, but they were shot without a trial.
It was very important to re-establish a view on this. When you are a sovereign in a community, in America, a small community, you actually are tending to the national security. You are not dependent on food from across the ocean or anywhere else. So you actually are upholding the general welfare and the national security interest. When you have a bunch of satellite people, such as a union of sovereign states, it's hard to break them. When you collect them all into a common target, they're easy to break. That was the strategy in the abstraction that came out of Rothschild's thinking. He knew that if you abstracted everything into the unity and worldview pitch, that you could confuse the people to the point of chaos, and then from chaos they would reestablish their new order. Now, this is important. Every person who contributes to a victory garden, to their community, and participates as a decent human being in a local community is a patriot and is a good person in this country. The idea that if you do not go with the global consensus means that you are some sort of a bad person.
They're actually, pretty good with their language. I mean, if you're against one world government, then you're obviously anti-government, aren't you?
In fact, we know it's very clear that it isn't going to be a government, one world government. It's going to be a totalitarian system of deciders. That they're in the hierarchy of participation diagrams that we built and distributed in 1999. It showed how the trade-offs are made from the global to the local level. People who have a spiritual conviction are called blockers, low-level, low-status knowledge. Those who buy in to the global consensus are deemed to have high-status knowledge among those who see the big picture. And the brainwashing, values washing techniques go to a point of collapsing a American or community resident and citizen, or a non-citizen national, to a global citizenship role model. Now, the word citizen is a corporate label. So if you have a global citizenship role model, there is an absolute intent in its face that you are going to be property. You are going to be chattel. You are going to be a human resource. And throughout history, the word goyim comes